The South African Weather Service has issued a level 5 warning for the coastal areas of KwaZulu-Natal as well as parts of Zululand. It comes after at least 13 people have died following floods across the province since the end of last week. Now, what is behind this weather phenomenon? Professor of Climate Change, Food Systems and Health with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, Professor Tafadzwanashe Mabhaudhi joins us further. Prof, good afternoon. Thanks for your time with us here on the SABC at this hour.
Afternoon, and thanks for having me.
Prof, at this point, what should our approach be regarding flood disasters in preparing for bigger rainfall, not limited to cities like Durban or even provinces, but applicable to all South African cities and towns?
Okay, thanks very much for that question. I think first and foremost, as a nation, we need to take climate change as a reality, that our weather patterns are changing, and that these extremes that we have been observing in the recent past are going to become more and more part of the norm. So we need to be having conversations about climate change outside of disasters, where no one is drowning, where no one is being washed away, and rethinking our policies, rethinking our infrastructure design, rethinking our early warning systems, rethinking our human settlement plans, and really ensuring that as a nation, we are climate prepared, we are anticipatory in terms of climate change, and that we are investing infrastructure-wise, early warnings, the natural environment in building that preparedness before disasters like this occur.
No, absolutely, Prof, because I actually want to then break it down. There are a number of factors influencing what is happening, climate change being one of them. Perhaps you could speak to the weather phenomenon or patterns that are also, or the role thereof, El Nino, La Nina. We even saw a tropical cyclone in Mauritius and how that's impacted, the weather. And I wonder if that's also playing a role in what South Africa is experiencing.
Yeah, so that plays a role. Climate change itself is not about bringing, in new weather systems per se. It's just about intensifying the existing weather systems or increasing their frequency. So, for example, now we are going through an El Nino, which typically in our region we would expect, drier weather, below average rainfall and so forth. But because of, that we now have increased variability, so we've got weather that is not typical of El Nino. And because of the energy built up in the system at this time of the year, because of that intensifying heat due to climate change, which we've seen since the Northern Hemisphere summer, we've got this intensity in the atmosphere, which is creating these conditions that are conducive and also intensifying, like the high pressure system that we've got now. It's being intensified, and we are starting to see these observations of heavy rainfall and downpours.
And so, Prof, when we look at South Africa's state of readiness, how would you say we are faring? We're looking at the role of the built environment. We're looking at infrastructure, which you alluded to, which needs desperate upgrades. There's also drainage systems, early warning detection systems that you also alluded to. How would you say we are faring at this point?
So we are not doing very well if we measure our success and relative, preparedness in terms of the number of people who get affected in these disasters, the number of lives that are routinely lost when we've got these sort of disasters. So we need to improve in terms of our early warnings. We've got a very robust early warning system that is managed by the South African Weather Service. Like for now, for instance, they've issued that level 5 warning, but how we communicate that information to the people in the affected areas in the appropriate language that they can understand, whether we have equipped them to be able to then respond and use that information to put themselves out of risk and out of harm's way, whether we've got anticipatory capacity to put our disaster response teams on alert to be able to respond timeously, whether we are changing our plans, the ecological infrastructure and spatial planning to ensure that we do not have people who are residing in these low-lying areas and therefore exposed to risk, that before the rainy season comes, are we clearing our stormwater drainage? Are we ensuring that, water can run off into the proper areas that it is supposed to drain into? So there are various actions that we need to really improve on, in order to mitigate the extent and severity of the disasters.
Well, Prof, speaking about spatial planning and ecology plans, even just transitions and inclusivity at large, what is the role of incorporating Indigenous knowledge systems in our approaches?
So it's important to incorporate Indigenous knowledge and integrate it with scientific knowledge. So, for example, we need to incorporate Indigenous knowledge insofar as forecasting, and also insofar as how we then communicate the science back to communities at the ground. If we can communicate it and contextualize it in the manner in which they understand or would engage the information, that makes the warnings more usable and more informative to the communities. In some areas, the rate of climate change has perhaps outpaced the rate at which our Indigenous knowledge updates itself. So how do we work with communities to build from the base that they have and enhance that knowledge? So increasing access to climate information and services then becomes integral to how we incorporate Indigenous knowledge and how we integrate it with scientific knowledge.
Prof, I have to wrap up. I just want to look at where to from here. So we're looking at the short-term plans and some of the immediate plans that are needed given the needs that have come to the fore as we work to learn on the go, but also put plans in place for the long term. What are you observing from your vantage point on that front?
So what we have observed is we always have short-term plans. We always have plans for response and relief. And we need to move away from being, in the relief category to being more in the anticipatory and preparedness category, so that we do not respond after the fact, but we act before the disasters occur. We need to ensure that, for example, there's a global initiative on early warning systems for all. So we need to really work to ensure that we embed these community-based early warning systems. We need to build awareness amongst communities on the implications of extreme weather events and build their capacity to respond and deal with climate information that might be channeled to them. We need to restore the natural environment so that it can provide its natural buffering capacity in the event of these storms. We need to invest in resilient, infrastructure so that it buffers the impacts of some of these storms and downpours. We also need to work as a community, as a whole, to take responsibility, social responsibility, and behavioral change from the individual going upwards. And those are daily actions that we need to be making and taking, as well as the strategic planning that needs to be involved.
Prof, thank you for your time with us on the SABC and for those sentiments. We'll leave the conversation there for now. Professor of Climate Change, Food Systems and Health with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, Professor Tafadzwanashe Mabhaudhi, joining us for that chat.